Hi, I'm Michael Kirsch, Chief Commercial Officer at Beacon. I'm here today at the Global Derivatives Conference 2017 in Barcelona with David Spiegelhalter, Winton Professor for the Public Understanding of Risk at University of Cambridge. David, thanks again for meeting me here. Your talk today was really impressive, really nice. One thing in particular resonated with me. You talked about innovation and how that's related to managing risk and not avoiding it. Can you talk a bit more about how you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really work in risk management, but I am very interested in the role of uncertainty in assessing risk and responding to it. And what I was trying to illustrate is the fact that we can really think of levels of uncertainty and our confidence in our analysis. And sometimes, everything's established, we understand how things are going on. I always use an example, roulette or a lottery. It's a risk. We completely can understand the risk. We know precisely the mechanisms, and I call that a 4-star analysis. But then we get more and more uncertain about the situation that we're in. I use the idea of 3 stars when, we just about have got pretty good measure of what's going on. We can do some optimization, we can do some actual risk modeling. But then when we start going to 2-star, even 1-star, we're actually having the humility to admit we don't understand all the processes, that unexpected things might happen, and in particular for 1-star, that real surprises that we can't even envisage might happen, and that we have to be ready for them. And that means building resilience into a whole system. So it means not optimizing. We're not trying to optimize mathematical models. We're always acknowledging the limitations of those. Right. And that's a tricky business. And almost by definition, it can't be quantified. We have to take a qualitative approach to this. And I pointed out that, for example, the people who've really been trying to do that are the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, who in some of their assessments just say, our knowledge isn't good enough to say whether, for example, the shrinkage of the Antarctic ice sheets is due to man or not. They have the humility to admit that.
Yeah, I like that, right? I think there's this risk often has got a bad rep, right? And people too quickly jump to a risk, we have to avoid it.
Oh, no, risk is great. I give a lot of talks in schools, and I say, take risks, go and take risks, but don't be stupid, don't be reckless. Right. Sort of protect yourself against the worst things that can happen to you, and be careful. But you won't get anywhere unless you take some risks.
Right. I think it's very interesting how, in the context of global derivatives here and the finance quantitative industry, banks generally have gotten the idea of risk right. Banks take risks, they make markets, right? Quants help them quantify those risks, make it a 4-star rather than a 1-star assessment. Now, clearly the financial crisis has shown that some things we were maybe thinking were 4-star, were maybe more like 1-star. So that, and I think that model is very helpful. What I think banks still are struggling with, even today, is the concept of maybe technical innovation, right, and allowing risks there. In particular, right, how do you actually allow your technology to move on a daily basis to keep up with all the changes in the market, changes in regulation, commercial changes, right, and staying too close on the security side there. Have you come across any examples in that sort of technical innovation and how risk assessments impact that sort of situation?
You could say, I don't work in finance, I tend to work in medicine, and you could say that's an application area where technical risk assessment is getting more and more important. If you go and see your doctor, they will put your data into a computer algorithm, and it'll tell you your chance of getting a heart attack or stroke in the next 10 years. And mine's about 15%. So I'm now taking statins to reduce that to about 10%. Nice. Now that was based on a risk assessment. It was actually sort of handed over to the machine, and the government guidelines is that anything over 10%, and I get offered statins. Now whether I choose to take them or not is my own risk management, because I know there's the possibility of side effects. Maybe it's actually quite contested what the side of those side effects are. But there's an element to which the expertise of the clinician has been passed over to an algorithm. And that's becoming very relevant in medicine as that happens more and more in cancer prognosis. It's going to happen even more in genomic analysis. To what extent those algorithms, how are they going to be used? How are they going to be communicated to decision makers such as myself? And also, what's the accountability of those algorithms? How are they going to be explained to people? And it's fine if it's a simple risk index. Even that, the risk index that did my heart attack risk, it's a linear model, but it's a Cox regression. You know, it's got all these technical aspects which you can't understand. Quite tricky to understand. If it had been based on some deep learning algorithm, it would be completely impossible to see where that number came from. So these are very interesting times, not just in finance, but in other areas where increasing technological input into our personal decisions.
What do you see as the challenges to the public, the policymakers, like all the different institutions, all the different stakeholders in this process? How do we navigate this deep
it's a
change?
fascinating time because of these accusations of a loss of trust in expertise, the growth of political populism. All these, I think, are relevant because I'm a quant as well, though I don't work in finance, but I believe in the power of numbers in our life, in our politics, not just personal and societal decisions. I really believe in quantitative analysis, assessment of the harms and benefits of potential policies, have those weighed up with their uncertainties. This is very relevant whether it's about vaccines or whether it's about Brexit, whether it's about anything. You know, we're talking about decision making in the face of uncertainties, and we should be trying to weigh those up. So this is a very contested area. The role of expertise, the role of analytics in personal decision making. I think it's completely riveting. And what I think it means is that as analysts, as experts, we can't just expect to be trusted. We can't expect people just to believe what we say. And actually, we have to, as people would say, we have to demonstrate trustworthiness.
Right.
And part of that demonstration is actually to open yourself up, to make yourself vulnerable to questioning. Because one aspect of being trustworthy is to allow other people to assess your trustworthiness. Right. This means it requires a transparency, it requires an openness, it requires actually giving people the tools to critique what you're doing. Now, this is a very delicate thing. If you're used to a very paternalistic sense of expertise where we tell you what's best for you, this is completely undermining it. And this is happening in medicine, it's happening in other areas. It's challenging, and it's very exciting now, because it means we have to think about not just our expertise, we have to think about how to communicate that in a way that enables people to check how trustworthy we are. We can't take it for granted anymore that people will just trust us.
Yeah. It's about a cultural change as well as a technological knowledge change.
And I actually welcome it. I welcome it. I think it's a challenge that we have to face, but it means that we have to think much more about how we communicate, our engagement with the audience, listening to the audiences, what are their concerns. Sometimes they're just wrong. You have to say, sorry, that's wrong. But sometimes they've got a point, and we have to listen to that.
Thank you very much, David.